This is a tutorial on the property showing agreement. Quick backstory. The year was 2003. I was working in a real estate office doing floor time. The phone rang and buyers were calling to see a property we had listed. It was an office listing, not my listing, but nevertheless they wanted to see it, and I agreed to drive down, open up the property that same afternoon, and show the property for them. So I get to the property before these buyers did, and I had this form, actually an earlier version of this form, on a clipboard. The buyers showed up. It was a large group, and after the greeting, I presented this form, and I asked that they sign, and I explained that this form means that if they decide to proceed with the purchase on this property, and not any other property, just the one that I'm here showing, spending my time and resources to facilitate a showing, that I represent these buyers as their agent. And they pushed back. They didn't want to sign, which I found odd because I thought, this doesn't obligate you to any other properties. This is not a buyer representation agreement. I'm not trying to take over as your exclusive agent. But I did leave an office I was working at. I drove across town in my car, and now I'm standing out here and allocating hours of my time to facilitate a showing at your request. Why on earth would you not have me as your agent if you're having me do agent work? And they refused. So I walked away. And I remember I did this walk of shame down the street where they were yelling at me. They were screaming at me and telling me they'd have my license taken, which they didn't, because here we are many years later and I'm still licensed. And I'm glad I set that boundary in retrospect, because in the course of being an agent, you get heartbreak when someone uses another agent. When you've done work, you've opened a property, you've facilitated a showing, and then you have your buyer, or what you thought was your buyer client, use someone else as their agent. Well, that's the purpose of this form. Let's jump right into it. So with this form, and I'll read this verbiage because it's so short and I'll explain it. This is a one-page form, very easy to go through. And the idea is that it's simple, because a buyer representation agreement, that is an overwhelming and intimidating contract. If you stick that in front of a buyer, that's a cold bucket of ice water on a potential client's face that really sours the relationship. Now, there are times where you need that, because you need to have a formal, very formal protection in place. And if you can get a buyer representation agreement signed, by all means, go for it. But that's not practical on a consistent basis. But you still need some protection. You can't just go around opening up properties for buyers that have zero commitment to you. Enter this form. Now, I'll read it very quickly. Buyer understands that, and it has your name as the agent, is allocating considerable time and resources to facilitate the showing of the property at the location listed below, and for that consideration, buyer commits to be exclusively represented by said agent for any property at the below locations. And it says underlined, this agreement pertains to only the property locations mentioned below and does not obligate the buyer to use said agent for properties not explicitly mentioned. This whole underlined section, that's to reassure the client or buyer that's signing this, saying, look, the property below, I'm out here spending my time and resources to facilitate showings. But I'm not asking to represent you on other properties. I'm not saying you can only use me as your agent. I'm just saying on the properties below. And this underlined part not only reassures the buyer, but it should reassure you that if the buyer has a problem with this, you need to get away from this buyer immediately, because this is such a small commitment. This is such a small thing to ask for from a buyer, where you're driving out somewhere and you're doing a showing, you're calling their agent, you're spending hours of your time. I mean, an attorney would be charging hundreds of dollars per hour for their service. And you as a professional, you're offering this service on speculation. The least that a buyer can do is sign this saying, sure, on this property, since you're out here and you looked up the MLS listing and set up the showing. You're going to walk me through and open it up with the key box that you pay for and the MLS access that you pay for. I mean, these are not free tools that we use as agents. So I'll wrap it up here so I don't go on, but you're going to put your name as the agent, property address of any showings you're going to do. If there are more than 3, add them anywhere, even below. Buyer's going to sign, you're going to sign. And this is going to tell the buyer that you expect to be represented on properties that you're showing. Now, this is a Balboa proprietary form. It can be found, well, this form is intended to be used by Balboa agents, but that's not to say that a non-Balboa agent can't do this. Take this verbiage right here and just paste it on a Word document. I mean, you can use the same template. This isn't some copyrighted form. I wrote this form personally, and it's open license. It's a open source document that you're welcome to use the text of. So go ahead and just copy this text, put it on a Word document, and use it. But the point of all this is to avoid doing work for free for buyers that aren't going to be loyal and are going to go around you with another agent. We don't need any of that. I do hope you found this video helpful, and I appreciate you watching. Thank you.